Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Welcome to the University of Southampton School of Psychology podcast. My name is Jacob Jewell. I'm an associate professor of psychology at the University of Southampton, and this is the podcast where we take a look at the people within the School of Psychology at the University of Southampton. Specifically, we're going to learn about the educational and career pathways of professors, lecturers, students, as well as alumni. And I hope we don't just learn about these individuals. I hope we can also learn from their experiences pursuing their education and careers. And so with that, let me introduce today's guest, Emma Palmer Cooper. Emma is a lecturer in psychology here at the University of Southampton, and she is a member of the Center for Innovation in Mental Health. We'll get all the other important details about her career and her education directly from her, so let's get started. Emma Palmer Cooper, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
For the benefit of our listeners, we want to learn about and learn from your experience pursuing a career in psychology. If we can talk through your history a little bit. Where are you originally from?
Well, I was born in Solihull, near Birmingham, then moved a couple of times and ended up growing up in Warwickshire, which is just south of Birmingham, and Leamington Spa, Stratford-on-Avon area.
Okay.
Grew up with Shakespeare.
Okay. And from what age did you live there?
So I moved to Warwickshire when I was 7, and we've lived in that area until I left to go to university.
Okay. So by the time you arrived there, you had already gone to school a couple years?
Yeah.
So you continued primary school at Warwick and finished primary school there? Yeah?
Yep. Yeah. Finished all of my schooling in Warwick.
What kind of student were you? Were you one of these kids that really loved school, loved their teachers, or were you perhaps a bit more like me who just couldn't wait until it was time to go run around outside?
Sort of both, really. I loved learning and I liked the social aspects of school, but I'm dyslexic, so I really struggled in primary school with learning to read and learning to write. I was quite behind a lot of my peers, and had to have extra lessons so that I could read and write. But I really enjoyed the sort of community aspects of school. And once I'd got the hang of reading and writing, things were a bit easier. So I did really enjoy going, but I definitely found it quite tough. Like, learning didn't come naturally to me, but I have a very curious mind. So that helped me kind of stay motivated.
Was there a specific point, or how old were you when you kind of felt like you hit your stride?
I think I always enjoyed more of the practical lessons when I was younger because there was less reading and writing involved. So I remember doing the kind of art and design lessons. I did also quite like when we started doing science lessons. They were very practical and you got to sort of listen to what we were being taught and then go away and do things. So probably the more hands-on kind of lessons.
And did that come in after primary school? So where did you go after primary school?
I went to high school and did high school from year 7 until I finished my A-levels. And it was, high school becomes a lot more academic, a lot more reading, less practical stuff. But I think I found things that I was interested in and things that I could do well. And so then I was sort of enjoying that aspect of the learning and the academics more.
Okay. So what subjects did you choose for A-levels?
I chose biology, IT, and psychology.
Can you say a little bit why you chose those 3 subjects?
Yeah, so like I said, I really enjoyed the sort of science subjects when I was younger, and biology was definitely the science that I'd done throughout school that I was more drawn to. And I quite like the teachers as well. And I've always been quite interested in technology and IT, and I did that for my GCSE as well. So I decided to carry that on. And I chose psychology as a bit of a wild card. I know quite a lot of people do for A-level because it's not something that you can often do earlier in schooling, but I've always found people interesting. So I thought it would be an interesting addition. But my plan was always to go into sort of a business type of career. So I thought I'll have a science, I'll have the IT, and then I'll learn psychology for fun.
Okay. When you say you had a business career in mind, can you say a little bit more specifically what you thought you would be doing?
Well, so I think from the psychology lessons, I ended up realising that there was a field called occupational psychology, which is about how people work in sort of businesses and in teams and things like that. And I honestly couldn't tell you why I thought I was going to go into a sort of business career other than, some people in my family work in this sort of nebulous business area, which is like a huge area. But I think I just thought, oh, well, people I know do that, so I'll go into there, and enjoyed psychology and thought, oh, well, I'll go into occupational psychology because I really enjoyed psychology A-level, wanted to do it at university, and that was a way that I could keep on this sort of career path I'd decided for myself, but still do the thing that I enjoyed.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I think I hear is that you were planning a career in business. You took psychology just for fun, but you liked that so much that you wanted to study that at university, and that was still a means to get to a career in business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, but can you say a little bit more about that decision to do psychology as opposed to business at university?
I think so. I was, went to speak to my careers advisor, and I was looking at different sort of prospectuses, and I was looking at the business course descriptions, and they all just sounded so boring. And I was aware that you can do many degrees and then go on to do a sort of training role afterwards in different organisations, and you don't have to have a business degree to do those. So, oh, well, if I'm going to spend some money on higher education, I'll do something that I find interesting.
Where did you do your undergraduate degree?
I went to Cardiff University.
And spoiler alert, you ended up being a lecturer in psychology. A big part of that is not only teaching, but doing research. So was there a point that you got involved with research during your undergraduate degree?
Yeah, it wasn't until my third year literature review and research project. So the way that it used to be run when I did my undergrad at Cardiff was you did a literature review on something that you found interesting and you designed a research project, but it could be in any topic. So, you could do brain imaging, you could go into forensic settings, and, you weren't actually having to do the research. And so I did mine on neuroscience of music. And I really enjoyed designing that study and understanding all of the sort of background literature in that. And it wasn't something that we'd explicitly studied in any of the lectures. And then my sort of empirical dissertation project was in the perception lab. I was looking at visual after effects and doing the research. I had to get people into the lab. I got to design the stimuli. I had to record all of the data and do all the data entry and stuff. And I absolutely loved it, like designing the research, like getting stuck into research that I hadn't learnt in my lectures. And then actually, like, I'm quite a nosy person. So being the first person to know the answer to my research question was like, I found that really fulfilling. And then being able to tell my supervisor, like, oh, look, this is the answer. I found that really interesting. So that was actually my first experience, and I was disappointed I hadn't done anything before then, because I would have really, really enjoyed it in, previous years as well.
Okay, so at what point did you decide not to go down business, but to stay more along the psychology line?
I think it was when there was some deadlines for these sort of graduate schemes that you could apply for. So my plan had originally been to move home. I was going to apply for one of these graduate schemes in a company in Birmingham so I could live at home. And then I was going to do my master's. And I started applying for these graduate positions. And my heart wasn't in it. Like, I was applying for it, but I wasn't really passionate about it. And I was thinking, I'm going to have to really decide what it is that I'm going to do when I've graduated. And then I started talking to my supervisor, and he'd said, oh, you could think about doing research and you could do a master's. And so I started looking into doing a master's by research, which is an MRes. And I just got so much more excited about looking into that. I lost hours researching all the different degrees that I could do, and realised that that was what I wanted to spend my time doing, instead of learning how to work for Nestle or Cadbury's.
Yeah. I don't want to get too far ahead. I want to ask you some questions about your master's, but I just want to go back and talk about undergraduate in general. How did you find the undergraduate experience? Was it what you thought it would be? Was it overwhelming, underwhelming? Can you say a little bit about what it was like to arrive on campus and to be an undergraduate student for 3 years?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it from day one. Having this sort of new sense of independence, meeting new people, meeting people with lots of similar interests to me, particularly with the subject. There wasn't that many of us at my school who had done psychology, and none of my very close friends had studied it. So suddenly there was this group of people who were just as excited as me about going to these lectures. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's a very daunting experience, moving away and, meeting new people and being in a new place. But I enjoyed the adventure. I definitely enjoyed the learning more as well. So with more of the freedom and study that you get in a psychology degree, where there's a lot of independent study alongside each of your lectures, it meant, I was in the lecture and I got my 2 hours of information, and then I could go to the library or go wherever and look up new research that hadn't been taught but was more recent, and really get stuck into the bits that I enjoyed. So I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I think because there was a lot more motivation and interest, the kind of problems that I've always had with reading and writing, I'm quite a slow reader, almost didn't seem to be as much of a problem anymore. And lots of the assignments were actually coursework. I get on a lot better with coursework than in-person exams, which is why I think I quite like research generally, because it's not a quick process. It's not, you don't have to know everything by heart. You can go away and look something up if you don't know the answer to it. So it really sort of suited me quite well.
Yeah. In real life is not a timed test.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I really enjoyed the challenge and the change in environment and the ability to just throw myself into this sort of academic interest.
Was being a good student part of your identity, or getting good marks part of your identity? Or was it something you kind of obsessed about? Or were you just like, I'm going to learn, and learning is my number one priority. If I do well in terms of marks, I do well. Yeah. What was, I guess, your approach to doing well at university?
I am a massive nerd, and I think doing extra reading is often part of the course, but I would always go off towards the kind of neuroscience and neuropsychology side of things when I was doing my extra reading. So that was definitely for me, and not necessarily going to come up in coursework or an exam. But I've never been the highest achieving person. I did quite well in my A-levels eventually, and I did okay in my GCSEs, but certainly, particularly within my friends, I think if you'd asked me when I was, say, 15 or 16, no one would have said, she's going to go and work in a university, she's going to be the one who gets a PhD. So I've always learnt because it's personal interest, and my achievements are because that's what I sort of compare myself to myself and not other people. So in that respect, that's not really been part of my identity. I've never been, the one who's always getting the top marks, and I always worked hard, but it wasn't for anything other than I wanted to do my best. And I think also as well, depending on the topic. So my first year grades were a bit all over the place, depending on how interesting I found the lecture. But we also had to do handwritten exams. So it was also how much I could write about it clearly and remember by heart. So I always did better in things where I could take my time with coursework as well.
After your undergraduate degree, you'd mentioned you moved on to do a master's, an MRes. Can you tell me a little bit about the research that you did there?
Yeah, so I was supposed to do a cognitive neuroscience MSc and ended up moving courses. So there wasn't a lot of people who'd applied for that particular course. So I did cognitive neuropsychology and rehabilitation. And because it was a master's by research, I had to do 3 research projects over the 3 semesters of the master's. So my first one was understanding how music could improve visual neglect in people who had experienced a stroke. And so we had people in a vision lab, and we were looking at their visual search. When we knew that they had neglect, we knew which side their neglect was on, and we played them music that they had told us they enjoyed, music that they told us they didn't enjoy, and then as a control we had music that one of the other participants had said they enjoyed as well. We ran that with a couple of people who'd experienced visual neglect and found that when you listen to music you enjoy, your visual neglect is reduced, because the theory is that the music is activating parts of your brain in a different way.
Yeah.
And so people were able to see more of their sort of visual area consciously. So visual neglect, there's nothing wrong with the way that your eyes are working, but the way that your brain is processing your sort of visual area means that part of it is not consciously available to you.
And like people with visual neglect, you tell them to draw a tree, they'll maybe draw half the tree.
Yeah.
Or maybe they'll just shave half of their face.
Or they'll do it on one side of a piece of paper. So you ask them to draw it in the middle and they'll do it to the side.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so that was my first project, which was really interesting. The second one was looking at, again, people who had various motor impairments, and we essentially were pushing them over with a robotic arm. So we were asking people to, with their body, track a dot that was moving across the screen, and they had to follow with swaying their body in time, and every now and then this robot arm would push them. And they were in a harness, so they wouldn't fall over, but it was then to see them. They were on like a balance plate. It was basically like one of those Wii exercise boards. And then it was to see people with different levels of kind of motor impairment or no motor impairment, how quickly they recovered. And so we were looking at the motor responses to that, and I did sort of psychological measures as well. And then the third project that I did was looking at brain imaging in its key motor coordination tasks. We were asking people to do particular motor tasks in the MRI scanner and looking at which areas of their brain were activated. And it was using simultaneous EEG and MRI. So that was the kind of novel bit, because usually you can't have EEG in an MRI scanner. So we wanted to have the kind of temporal accuracy with the EEG and the structural accuracy of the MRI. So it was really varied, but it was all related to this rehabilitation after some kind of neurological injury. It taught me lots of different research methods and skills. So it was very interesting.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you said this earlier, but what university was the degree at?
University of Birmingham.
Okay. And how long did that take?
That was 1 year.
That was 1 year, okay. And then you moved on. Did you do your PhD directly after that?
No. So the reason I did my master's straight after my undergrad was I was applying for research jobs because I decided I wanted to be a researcher, and I had no research experience other than my dissertation.
Okay.
So I decided I was going to do a research master's so that I could get a year's worth of experience. I also had a research assistant job at the same time. So I basically worked on 4 research projects in 1 year, and then applied for a research worker job at King's College London. And that was working on a project. It was a very, very big project that was in about 5 different countries in Europe, looking at first episode psychosis. But I was on the control recruitment team. So we were recruiting all of the healthy controls to compare our clinical samples to. So I did that for a year, and within that year then applied for PhDs and started that the year after.
Okay. Well, that sounds like really good experience. I want to go back for just a second. So when you said that you were interested in research jobs, that was coming directly out of your undergraduate degree?
Yes, I realised that I wanted to go into research and applied for a couple of jobs while I was still finishing my undergraduate degree. And a lot of the feedback that I got from my applications was, your enthusiasm and your academic ability is really clear, but you don't have any experience. So you need to go away, get some experience, and then we think you'd be more successful. So I decided that I was going to do my master's.
Can you say what specific research jobs were out there that you were applying for?
Yeah, they were all graduate research assistant jobs. So most of them were at Cardiff University. So it was things like helping people with recruitment, collecting data, sort of managing the day-to-day sort of lab activities of a research group. So it was very entry-level stuff.
And at university?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then I think you said while doing your master's degree, you also had a research assistant position?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you say what that is and how you were able to get that?
Yeah, so that was with one of the lecturers in the University of Birmingham, the School of Psychology, and they had got a grant to run their decision-making study. And essentially they needed somebody to put posters up, to organise the appointments with participants who signed up, and then run the study when they came into the lab and pay them. So I did about 1 day a week doing that, and then I did a bit of data entry as well, because we didn't have as much of the good technology that we do now for sort of collecting participant data. So there's a lot of manual entry into Excel. So that was really interesting to see what the day-to-day life of a researcher is. It's not just the research papers. So yeah, that was really interesting. Yeah, and definitely cemented that I wanted to go on to do a research career.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's a lot of really good experience in 1 year. And then you had an additional year of more experience after that before you started your PhD.
Yeah, as a full-time researcher.
Yeah. And during that year, though, you applied for PhD programs.
Yes.
Maybe it's just worth asking, did you have a specific strategy for finding what programs to apply to, or finding specific researchers that you wanted to have be your supervisor during your PhD?
I had two approaches, basically. So I thought I might want to carry on doing something in the sort of vision and perception space. So I had emailed a couple of people who, on their webpage said that they were looking for PhD students, met with a couple of people. I did apply in Birmingham, and also Warwick University applied for a couple of PhD projects. I was awarded a project at Warwick University, but it came with no funding. So I'd passed the interview and, they were happy to have me, but we couldn't find any funding. So that's when I got my job in London. And so I tried that approach for a year, and inevitably as well, the project that I was interested in, you have to make it match up with your supervisor. So it wasn't the project that I'd started out my kind of idea with.
Yeah.
So then when I started my job in London, there every year, most universities will have a scheme of funding. So I looked through the projects that they were offering, and the group that I was currently a researcher for were advertising a PhD. So I applied for a project with them, and I actually didn't get to interview for that first round. So they gave the funding to another project to somebody else. And then they'd done the first round of interviews, and I got an email to say, we've done our first round of interviews. We've not awarded all of the places. So we're now doing a second round for our sort of waitlist people. So I got an interview, but I had to then, before the interview, find a new project to apply for. So again, then I had to look through all of the projects that were available through this scheme, and go and speak to the supervisors, and found one that was very different to the other projects that I'd been looking at, but still aligned with a lot of my interests. And it was looking at metacognition and insight in psychosis, so self-awareness about self and illness experiences.
Okay.
And I'd never really looked into it that much, other than knowing that people with schizophrenia and psychosis tend to have poor awareness of their symptoms. So it was like another new kind of intellectual rabbit hole to go down, and got on with the supervisor, and then the interview went really well. So it was quite a sort of winding journey to find the PhD project and the funding and the supervisor, all at the same time.
The stars have to align.
Yes, definitely. But I think I would have been happy doing all of them. Like I said, I thought I was going to do one thing, and then decided I was actually going to sort of go into a psychology career, did lots of different areas of psychology and sort of research and experience. And so being able to have the experience of a PhD in something that I found interesting was my goal, rather than I have to do this very, very specific project.
So you finished your PhD at King's College. Where did you go after that?
I then got a postdoc position at the University of Oxford in the Department of Psychiatry.
How long were you there?
I was in that role for, I was 2.5 years in psychiatry, and then the project finished, and then I went to a different postdoc role in the School for Primary Care Research. That was more to do with public engagement and being a kind of researcher who was promoting involving people with lived experience in research. So I did those, and then I applied to be a lecturer in Southampton.
Now, as a lecturer, what are you primarily investigating in your research?
Generally, my area of research is mental health and well-being, and with the nature of supervising students and working with different colleagues, it's sort of gone off in a couple of directions. So I still research schizophrenia and self-awareness, and do that in a number of different ways, and also look at how we can use this knowledge to create therapeutic interventions for people with schizophrenia and also bipolar and other mental health problems. But I also have started to do research in how we can use artificial intelligence in this space to support interventions, and also looking at general population well-being and creativity.
So you've done research on a load of different things. Looking back at everything, is there a particular finding or discovery that you're most proud of?
In my postdoc, I was very proud of the project that I was working on, because we've now influenced policy, and we were looking at whether you could test for a type of autoimmune cause of psychosis with a simple blood test. Yeah. Wow. And the study was basically trying to show that there's a significant number of people who are being treated for psychosis who could actually be treated for an autoimmune disorder, and so the treatment would be different. So that was a really interesting project to work on, and I did a couple of papers on that I'm very proud of, but that research is now being used to influence how we support people with their first episode of psychosis in parts of the NHS. So that was also
that's
quite
great.
Rewarding. Yeah.
So I'm also wondering, for students who may come to the University of Southampton to do a psychology degree, what modules might they expect you to be teaching?
So I work on the mental health and wellbeing modules. So I am the module lead for the psychology of mental health.
Okay.
And that's where we introduce the concept of mental health, but also well-being, how they're similar and how they're not. And it's kind of an introduction to this area of research, but also how we use it clinically, but in the more broader context of research and society. And I also teach on the second year current issues in clinical psychology module.
And did you develop both of those or one of those yourself?
Yeah, I developed the psychology of mental health. Basically, we had lots of our students doing the clinical psychology module, and they were really interested in understanding about mental health, and they wanted to know more. But within that module, we're teaching about lots of different mental health problems. So we created this optional module so that if that's something you're really interested in, you kind of get an introduction to what these concepts are, but it's the sort of bigger picture. And then in the second year, you can understand specifically how research and influence clinical psychology.
So I understand also that you organized some kind of knitting or craft sessions with students, and this was pre-COVID, but you're looking to bring it back. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I was doing more of my patient and public involvement work before I came to Southampton, I got interested in understanding how creative activities could support well-being, and kind of went down a bit of a personal interest research rabbit hole. And found, these creative activities are very good for well-being, but they're also very, very simple to deliver. You don't have to be a mental health expert to run some sort of session that's offering space to relax and enjoy yourself. So we decided to run that for our undergraduate students to just have a bit of space to relax and try out some new activities. And I've done a bit of research on that as well, like colouring in for students. And so even in COVID, when we weren't able to run the activities, we were offering the research study to students so they could still kind of take part in these activities, even if we weren't able to do it in person. And we're also now doing that with community groups as well. So hoping to bring it back to students and give them that creative space.
So these sessions that you ran where you did crafts, can you say a little bit more about what a student should expect if they were to come along to one of these? Yeah,
it was a fairly unstructured session, to be honest. We would explain very briefly what the research basis was and why we thought that this was a good activity for people to try. And then we had a couple of different things that they could have a go at. So there was knitting, there was crochet, there was sort of knitting looms. So you don't have to use the knitting needles or crochet hooks, but it's a lot easier to do. And also colouring, and just said, have a go. We'll do some sort of quietly and everyone can just sort of focus. Give people some space to do that and then see how they felt afterwards. So I think maybe PsychSoc were running similar things.
PsychSoc is the Psychology Society on campus, yep.
I think they were running something similar for the last couple of years, or we do like community activities where that sort of activity is involved. So it's definitely been something that's happened for a while in the department, but we're going to try and bring back the focus specifically for wellbeing ones soon.
Is there something about doing crafts that is appealing to you? I mean, do you do crafts yourself?
Avid knitter, avid crocheter, love colouring in as well. So I find it's a way for me to kind of applied fidgeting almost. So because of my ADHD, I often fidget, and it's a way for me to fidget, but focused fidgeting. So I'm one of those people, normally if I'm watching TV, I'm standing up, I'm sitting down and walking around. I can't focus on what's on the TV, for example, but I can sit and watch TV if I'm crocheting or knitting. I find the same in meetings as well. I can focus a lot more on what someone's saying on, say, a Teams meeting if I'm focusing on colouring or knitting or something, or conference presentations as well. So, so this has definitely come from a sort of personal experience.
Was that something like, were you always kind of into that, or is it something you picked up along the way just for fun and found that it was helpful in other ways?
I accidentally discovered knitting during my PhD. So I was taking part as a volunteer at the British Science Festival, and we were just supposed to be there to sort of point people towards the different stands, and someone came running over and said, "Is anyone here a neuroscientist or a psychologist?" And I said, "Me." And they were like, "Right, do you knit?" And I said, "No." And so they gave me a crash course in knitting, and it was for a knit a neuron stand. So they were using craft as a way to explain different aspects of neuroscience, and it was something for children and adults to both engage in. And so they taught me how to knit, so I could knit a neuron while I was talking about the research that I did. But then I took the bits home with me so I could practice, because I was going back the next day and realised I actually really, really liked it. And so just carried on doing it from there. So it was a better way of me sort of spending an evening if I was trying to relax instead of just fidgeting and moving around.
Finally, I just want to ask you, what advice do you have for anyone who is interested in your particular career path?
I think the most important thing, if you're going to go into academia or research, or you're just not sure what it is that you want to do, is follow your interests, because you'll always enjoy what it is that you're doing and you'll find your path. So mine probably looks like quite a winding, weaving way to get to where I am today, but I've enjoyed every single step of it, and I've learnt so many different skills, and I've worked in so many different fields, and I think it actually has helped me in my career because I've been able to switch in that way. So yeah, just follow what you're interested in and things will fall into place.
Wow, that sounds great. Well, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast, Emma. Greatly appreciated.
Oh, thanks very much for having me.
A big thanks to Emma for coming on the podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Emma's research, you can listen to an interview she gave on Psyched. Psyched is another podcast in the School of Psychology hosted by Tess McGuire and Poppy Hulbert. The podcast bridges the gap between current research in psychology and people's lived experiences, and that's experience either with mental health problems or working in the field of psychology. You can hear Emma's interview in the episode called Creativity and Mental Health. Many thanks to Lucas Bland, James McDonald, Aranza Novella Franco for their assistance in the podcast studio. The music was written by Scott Peterson and performed by the Iowa State Drumline.